When I say meditation, again, I want to qualify by explaining, because people have a lot of concept of meditation. Because meditation is sometimes like sitting, lighting, saying Om, or learning, burning incense, saying mantras. I mean, that is, of course, a form of meditation. But meditation is much more than that. Much more than that. Ultimately, meditation is skillful means, is to really bring about, basically, because as a mind is distracted, distraction is the root cause of all our problem, is that through the mindfulness to bring our mind home, to create mindfulness and awareness, and to kind of unclothe or peel away all the barriers and the, obstructions, and slowly reveal, find our true nature and our true heart, or our fundamental nature, as well as also the compassion and wisdom. That's what meditation is, and ultimately leading to the inherent realization of the nature mind. For example, when you speak from the highest point of view, like from the point of view of some of you may have heard of the teaching called the Mahamudra, the Dzogchen, which are the highest teachings in the Tibetan tradition. That when you talk of meditation in that respect, or according to that, it is often meant by meditation means abiding by the recognition of our true nature. Is that clear? So, reason why, so therefore, what I am saying when I say from meditative, or from the yogi, or from experiential, is because also, Western people are very practically seeking. I don't know whether you're practical or not. Sometimes trying to be too practical is very unpractical. But at least we are trying to be very practical. How can we relate? How can we do it? How can we just be there? Out there. You understand? Very much, particularly very much kind of a goal-oriented. Yeah, very much. And sometimes it's just really out there. And that's why sometimes we miss it. Because actually it's not out there, it's actually here. That we have to slowly realize and find. And we have to disarm our own negativity, our own aggression. And there's a way, and extraordinarily sometimes, in just on one moment, we are so many people at the same time. In one moment we are all this aggressive, sometimes even negative, we can be, but in another breath, we can be this actually very wonderful person. Because we have this, you can say, the light and the shadow. The point of the spiritual path is to really, to teach you what to abandon and what to adopt. To abandon the negative aspect of ourselves. To adopt the more positive, the wholesome aspect of your being. And which is a choice, anyway, it's a choice. So therefore we have to be educated, we have to become aware. To be aware. Because sometimes, you see, we don't know how to make the choice because we do not have the wisdom of discernment. So we cannot discern because we do not have that wisdom. And also that wisdom is something we have to, through the teachings, to cultivate in ourselves. So that we come to discern for ourselves. Not someone to tell us what to do or what not to do, but for ourselves to discover. Is that clear? And so, if you were to begin very simply, I think one of the most important points for all of us is to become real, to become real, to become authentic, to become genuine. So the whole thing is to strip away all that is unnatural. I call it the natural striptease. The striptease. Strip away. Free away. Strip away. So that we become free of ourselves, because there's so much, isn't it? So much stories, cinema, so much. That's why there's no peace. So much pressure, and also so much speed, hurriness, and then also speed. In fact, one master, Soygal Rinpoche, he always relate speed and aggression as together. I think two of the worst symptoms in the West is speed and aggression. And we need to kind of slow down. Slow down doesn't mean you become extremely slow. You understand? It's rather when you are very spacious. Sometimes we can become very efficient. We can accomplish a lot in a very short span of time. Because sometimes you notice that our life is filled with activities and doing many things. Really, sometimes so many things we do, when you really question, what is it for? What does it really bring to you ultimately? Sometimes we just do, we just activity. Like sometimes maybe you're stuck in your own home on a holiday. Just go around the house will take the whole day, isn't it? There's plenty to do, more mess. You come there, you make, if suppose there was no you, no house, no mess. But as soon as you come into a clean house, you make a mess, which you have to clean. So it becomes a vicious circle, in a funny way, isn't it? And really you just go around. And seemingly you do so many things, you just go by and you just say, what have I accomplished? I think sometimes we have to question that. Not that, there are things that we have to do that's unavoidable, but sometimes we just simply get carried away, mindlessly. I think we need to simplify also. And really ask ourselves what is really most important. That's why, facing death, coming to terms with the death, help us to sort out our priorities, because we realize that we could die any day anyway. We know that we're going to die one day, but we do not know when we're going to die. And we can never say when we're going to die. It's completely unpredictable. In fact, to die is very simple, as I always say. You breathe out and you can't breathe in, it's called death. See? So that's one of the reasons why, when you come to face death is to come to face life. Face yourself and to really come to sort out priorities, to see whether you really have a life. You understand? On one hand, we can be so many things and busy, confused, but the next moment, if you know how to kind of stop, take a break, or come home, just quietly, just quietly, very simply. It's incredible, something settles. It's purified and freed. Do you understand? Really, sometimes it's as simple as that. But basically it's like for us to just to sit, just to be. To be with ourselves. Do you understand? Just to be. Just to be. Like, for example, here. I come and, sit in front of you, just like this. Just sit like that. The thing just naturally dissolve. Do you understand? It just melt away. Your kind of ordinary mind, or ordinary concerns just kind of dissolve. Then there's a sense of transcendence also, and sense of peace. In fact, I'm just, very essentially just showing that, Just, for example, just sitting here just like this. Just as I communicate this to you, if you can feel a little bit with me, perhaps also you feel a little bit that peace. Piece of peace. A little bit. Do you feel a little bit? A little bit. See, it's kind of a rest, Just a rest. You understand? Rest. That's why, to begin with, very simply, because you want to be practical. Now, how can I do it? Very practically, it just be spacious. But when you say just be spacious, it can sound like a cliche. It could sound like a cliche. It could also sound quite simplistic. But it's how it's spoken. You understand? How it's spoken, not the word. See, the most important point is just being spacious. Open, spacious. Like the space, isn't it? Wonderful thing about the space, isn't it? Because of the space, everything's possible to exist. Thanks to space. So you see, just by being just spacious, very spacious. Even though you might not be spacious, just aspire spaciousness. Aspire spaciousness. I remember this great master, Dujum Rinpoche, when I was translating for him in one of the public talks in Paris. He said, have a sky inside you. He said, have a sky inside you. Do you understand? Just spacious. Sky-like spaciousness. That sometimes even when we visualize that little bit, or just aspire, just imagine a little bit also, it brings a certain atmosphere of certain peace. It has a way of quietening. Because it's all mind anyway. It's mind. The wonderful thing of mind, wonderful thing about life is everything is changing. Nothing is inherently existing, or nothing has an independent existing characteristic. Everything is interdependent, and it's all impermanent. Wonderful thing, but impermanent, it can change. Do you understand? That it can change. That state of mind, the negative state of mind, can be changed instantly by positive thinking, or by training of the mind. And the teaching is called the training of the mind, by transforming the mind. So the way to really bring about inner peace is through the transforming the mind. Is that clear? Now here there are two ways. There's an analytical meditation, that through deep reasoning to realize how our own aggressivity, our own speed, all these things are that which causes us the lack of inner peace. So through reasoning you come to realize the kind of, the erroneous way in which we live. But then through the practice of meditative approach, or what is called the single-pointed, or it's called Njogam in Tibetan, you come to actually experience that by, for example, when I say just by being spacious. By being spacious, that mind lights up, something is lightened. Do you understand? Eased quietly. And then being freed. See, so what I really realized, you see,
Was habe ich erkannt?
the most important thing
Das Allerwichtigste
is to be in touch with oneself.
mit sich selbst in Kontakt zu
It
sein.
is because we are not in touch with ourselves profoundly.
Weil wir nicht mit uns selbst in Kontakt sind, tiefgehend,
As a result, we are not who we really are
sind
or
wir
can be.
als Resultat nicht das, was wir wirklich sein können oder sein könnten.
In fact, from a spiritual point of view,
Von einem spirituellen
when you are
Gesichtspunkt,
really in touch with yourself, most profoundly
wenn man wirklich
in touch
mit sich
with yourself.
selbst in Kontakt ist, auf
You are-
tiefgründigste Art und Weise,
in touch with, from a Buddhist point of view, we would say in touch with your Buddha nature.
würde man von einem buddhistischen Standpunkt aus sagen, man ist in Kontakt mit der eigenen Buddha-Natur.
Or from a Christian point of view, you would say you're in touch with God.
Von einem christlichen Standpunkt würde man sagen, man ist in Kontakt mit Gott.
Because you see, because our nature,
Denn unsere Natur,
our innermost nature,
unsere innerste Natur,
we can call it the ground. In the teachings, it's spoken of ground.
wird in den Lehren als Grund bezeichnet.
Grund. What is ground?
Was ist
Is the
Grund?
fundamental basis.
Die grundlegende
It's like
Basis.
maybe the sky is like the ground,
Sagen wir mal, der Himmel
For
wäre
example,
jetzt der Grund zum
in which
Beispiel.
everything exists within the space.
Und denn alles existiert innerhalb seines Raumes.
Thanks to the sky, everything can exist.
Also aufgrund des Raumes, aufgrund des
Without
Himmels kann
the
alles darin
space,
entstehen.
nothing can exist.
Ohne Raum kann nichts existieren.
Like the ground.
Das ist also die
Ground of our
Grundlage.
nature.
Die Grund
That
der
ground
Natur.
of our true nature
Diese Grundlage unserer
is
wahren
something
Natur
that really we need to be in touch with.
ist etwas, mit dem wir wirklich in Kontakt sein müssen.
And on so many levels,
Und auf so vielen
we
Ebenen.
can speak this on so many
Wir
levels.
können darüber auf so vielen verschiedenen
importance
Ebenen
of-
sprechen.
I mean, I think you also know already from your own experience anyway.
Und ich denke, Sie kennen das auch aus Ihrer eigenen Erfahrung.
From a very ordinary point of view,
Von einem ganz gewöhnlichen Standpunkt
when you are
aus,
in touch with yourself,
wenn man wirklich mit sich selbst in
or
Kontakt ist.
when you're well in yourself,
Oder wenn man sich in sich selbst
then
wohlfühlt,
things are much easier.
dann läuft alles viel einfacher.
Things flow.
Alles fließt.
Our contact with others
Unser Kontakt zu anderen
and the world,
und zur Welt.
everything is more, how do you say, coherent, and more in harmony.
Alles
Maybe
ist
the word better is word harmony.
zusammenhängend oder besser mehr in Harmonie.
Harmony. It is also when you see, like for example, His Own Dalai Lama always speaks about the importance of good heart.
Seine Heiligkeit der Dalai Lama spricht zum Beispiel immer wieder über die
You
Wichtigkeit
see,
eines guten
these days
Herzens.
it's like a fashionable to be a good human being,
Heutzutage ist es fast eine Modeerscheinung, ein guter Mensch sein zu wollen.
to be a good human being, you know.
Guter Mensch sein.
Rather than being Christian, Buddhist, this, you want to be a good human being.
Also statt zu sagen, ich bin Christ oder Buddhist oder irgendwas, möchten sie einfach nur ein guter
But
Mensch sein.
actually, that may be, because to say good human being, it's like you don't belong to any particular school or any religion, or you transcend, you're a good human being. But actually, it's not so easy just to be a good human being.
Also sie
It's
wollen
not
damit
easy.
ausdrücken, ich bin ein guter
Not
Mensch.
easy.
Das heißt also, ich gehöre keiner Gruppierung an, keiner Religion, das habe ich alles überwunden. Aber genau genommen, wirklich ein guter Mensch zu sein, ist nicht so einfach.
Because if you're a really good human being,
Denn wenn man ein wirklich guter Mensch
you're
ist,
truly a good Christian,
dann ist man wirklich ein guter Christ
and you're a good Buddhist.
oder ein guter Buddhist.
You understand? Very much. Sometimes you see they think that to be good, you can. I don't know. Somehow it's like the religion is one thing, to be good human being is another.
Manchmal haben die Leute so eine Vorstellung, dass Religion ist eine Sache und ein guter Mensch sein eine andere.
Of course, there's an aspect of religion
Natürlich gibt es einen
that
Aspekt
become
der
rather
Religion,
complex,
der etwas komplex sein
rituals
kann.
and
Zum Beispiel
philosophies and
die
many things.
Rituale, die Philosophie und so weiter.
But leave those aside.
Aber wenn man das mal
When
zur
you
Seite
really come
lässt,
to the heart of the spiritual teachings,
wenn man wirklich zum Herzen der
the
spirituellen Lehren
whole
vordringt,
point of that
dann ist doch der
is to
Hauptpunkt,
make us into good human beings.
dass wir ein guter Mensch werden sollen.
So therefore, really, to be a good human being,
Daher ein guter Mensch zu sein,
it's not so easy.
ist nicht so einfach.
And also, like, His Holiness Dalai Lama speaks of importance of warm heart.
Und seine Heiligkeit der Dalai Lama spricht auch immer über die Wichtigkeit eines warmen Herzens, eines guten Herzens.
Not always it's easy for us to be warm-hearted.
Aber es ist nicht immer einfach für uns, warmherzig zu sein.
Often we are cold.
Wir sind oft kaltherzig.
And also how often we are very, how do you say, awkward.
Und manchmal sind wir auch unbeholfen.
Self-conscious.
Oder uns unserer selbst
You
bewusst.
understand? We're not really relaxed.
Wir sind nicht entspannt,
Not at ease.
nicht gelassen.
So what I'm really saying, to have a warm heart,
Das heißt also, ein warmes Herz
to
zu
have a
haben,
good heart,
ein gutes Herz zu
to
haben,
be a good human being,
ein guter Mensch zu sein.
is really to need to be in touch with yourself.
Um dorthin zu gelangen, müssen wir mit uns selbst in Kontakt sein.
Even for that.
Selbst dafür.
And that's why you see, like for example, when we begin
Und daher, wenn wir
on a
anfangen,
spiritual path,
auf einem
I think you see,
spirituellen Pfad,
I think if you really understand, I think it's we really understand
wenn
the
wir
teachings.
wirklich die Lehren verstehen würden,
The point of teaching
ist der Punkt der Lehren,
is not for the sake of the teachings.
in den Lehren geht es nicht um, also
Like-
die Lehren existieren nicht um ihrer selbst
For
willen.
example, the Buddhism
Zum Beispiel Buddhismus
does not exist for the sake of Buddhism.
existiert nicht um des Buddhismus willen,
It is actually to make us into good human beings.
sondern es geht darum, dass es uns zu guten Menschen werden lassen.
Is that clear?
Ist das klar?
It's not for the sake of religion.
Also es
Not the
geht
sake
nicht
of
um die
Buddhism.
Religion an sich.
In fact, something incredible about
Das
Buddha Dharma.
unglaublich am Buddha Dharma ist,
It goes beyond, particularly as you go higher into the teachings.
speziell wenn man höher und höher in den Lehren
You go beyond all culture,
geht man jenseits oder überschreitet man, überwindet man
and
alle
you go
Kulturen.
even beyond Buddhism.
Man überwindet selbst den Buddhismus.
In fact, Buddhism actually is beyond Buddhism.
Denn Buddhismus geht eigentlich über Buddhismus hinaus.
You understand?
Verstehen Sie?
Very much. And so, therefore, but what is also extraordinary
Und was eigentlich außergewöhnlich
is
ist,
that even though this extraordinary wisdom,
obwohl es diese außergewöhnliche Weisheit gibt
kind of, and compassion teachings,
und die Lehren auch über das Mitgefühl,
which really shows us our true nature,
die uns wirklich unsere wahre Natur zeigen.
but the trouble is, in order for us to, how do you say, to bring that into our being,
Ist doch das Problem, dass um das in unser eigenes Wesen zu bringen,
then there is methods.
brauchen wir eine Methode.
There's means, we call it skillful means.
Gibt es Mittel oder wir nennen sie geschickte Mittel,
Skillful means, methods,
Methoden,
which helps us.
die uns helfen sollen.
These means are only skillful means
Und diese Mittel sind einfach nur geschickte Mittel,
to awaken the Buddha in us.
um den Buddha in uns zu erwecken.
And then so that when we begin, for example,
Wenn wir also anfangen zum Beispiel,
like if I were to give an example,
um mal ein Beispiel zu geben.
you see, of the practice,
Ein Beispiel für die Praxis,
such as like meditation.
zum Beispiel der Meditation.
Now, even with meditation,
Also auch was Meditation angeht.
sometimes when I use the word meditation,
Manchmal, wenn ich das Wort Meditation benutze,
I become a little bit reticent to use the word meditation
ich habe ein bisschen ein Widerstreben, dieses Wort zu benutzen,
before actually giving a background.
bevor ich nicht einen gewissen Hintergrund gegeben habe.
Because often people have concepts of what meditation
Denn
is.
oft haben die Leute Konzepte über das Wort oder den Begriff Meditation
Narrow it down.
und sie engen das ein.
Sometimes you may think is meditation is someone sitting like this saying Om.
Vielleicht haben Sie das, meinen Sie, wenn Sie das Wort Meditation hören, es wäre jemand, der dann da sitzt und sagt
And burning incense.
und ein Räucherstäbchen anzündet.
Well, that is a kind of a form of meditation.
Natürlich, das ist eine Form der
But
Meditation.
meditation is more than that.
Aber Meditation ist mehr
There are
als das.
so many
Es
practices
gibt so viele verschiedene
and
Praktiken
so many
und
levels.
so viele verschiedene Ebenen.
Interesting, you see, I've now been teaching. I've been in the West for quite a number of years,
Ich bin jetzt schon einige Jahre im Westen und lehre
and I've
dort.
been teaching for now, I don't know, about 30 years now.
Und ich lehre jetzt insgesamt vielleicht 30 Jahre.
And also, as I become a little older,
Und da ich jetzt auch ein bisschen älter
maybe a
werde
little bit more experience,
und vielleicht auch
perhaps,
ein bisschen mehr Erfahrung habe,
I always try to really look behind the teachings.
versuche ich immer hinter
to
die
see
Lehren zu schauen.
what the real meaning is.
Um zu
And it's
schauen,
incredible.
was die wirkliche Bedeutung
Sometimes
ist.
the practice comes with a particular form,
Und das ist wirklich unglaublich. Also manchmal kommt eine Praxis und hat eine gewisse Form.
and you take that method,
Und
you
dann
practice
benutzt man
it.
diese Methode, praktiziert sie.
As you practice,
Und wenn man dann praktiziert und praktiziert
And
und praktiziert
understand,
und sich
understand.
immer weiter versteht und
and
versteht,
then after a while,
nach einer Weile
you really realize the real meaning,
erkennt man den wirklichen Sinn der Praxis,
real meaning,
die wirkliche Bedeutung,
real purpose.
den wirklichen Zweck.
So the point what I'm saying is that when you start practicing a method,
Der Punkt ist, dass wenn man anfängt, eine Methode
sometimes
zu
it's a
praktizieren,
mistake to think, oh, this is a Buddhist practice.
dann ist es manchmal ein Fehler zu denken, das ist eine buddhistische Praxis.
Yes, it comes from a Buddhist tradition.
Natürlich, es kommt aus der buddhistischen Tradition
It may have certain kind of forms
und es hat vielleicht eine gewisse
that
Form,
associate with a particular tradition.
die eben mit einer gewissen Tradition
However,
zusammenhängt.
actually go really deeply into it.
Doch wenn man wirklich tief hineingeht,
It's a skillful means
dann ist es einfach ein
which
geschicktes
helps us to
Mittel,
realize
das uns
the
hilft zu
truth
erkennen,
that's inherent in all of us.
die Wahrheit zu erkennen, die in uns allen innewohnt.
Like for example, when I talk about meditation,
Zum Beispiel, wenn ich jetzt
Like
über
when
Meditation
we begin.
spreche. Wenn man anfängt,
the practice called shamatha.
gibt es die Praxis nach
Now,
Shamatha.
when I say shamatha,
Wenn ich jetzt hier Shamatha
I mean some of
sage,
you say, yes, yes.
dann sagen Sie vielleicht, ah ja, ach ja,
Shamatha, yeah.
ja, Shamatha,
Shamatha, yeah.
Ja, ja, ja.
Shamatha, yeah, shamatha.
Shamatha.
Or if you say shine, someone who
Oder
doesn't
wenn man
understand
sagt,
shine,
Shine,
you say shine, yeah, shine, I know. Yes.
ah ja, Shine kenne ich ja.
Yeah. You can just simply think that, because you're just familiar, like,
Also weil man damit schon mit
because you
vertraut
understand
ist,
the concept.
dann hat man schon ein Konzept.
But actually, it is more than that.
Aber tatsächlich
You
ist
have
es
to
mehr
really
als
realize.
das. Man muss wirklich erkennen,
Actually, the teachings become extremely profound when you go beyond just simply the merely understanding of concept of this and really understand, when you begin to really appreciate.
also die Praxis wird wirklich tiefgründig, wenn man hinter das Konzept schaut. Und dann weiß man es
When
wirklich
you
zu schätzen.
understand in practice really profoundly,
Wenn man eine Praxis also auf
it
tiefgehende Art und
might
Weise
be the
versteht,
most basic
kann es
practice,
vielleicht die grundlegende
but is
Praxis
the
sein,
most profound.
aber sie ist die
That's
tiefgründigste.
something very incredible about Buddhism.
Das ist wirklich unglaublich am Buddhismus.
That there is always the wisdom and the skillful means
Dass
together.
immer
The
Weisheit
true
und geschickte Mittel, also die beiden Wahrheiten, miteinander einhergehen.
Together. That means a very simple practice
Also eine ganz einfache Praxis
can be the most profound
kann die
if you
tiefgehendste sein,
realize
wenn man sie erkennt,
it's true.
wenn man ihre Wahrheit erkennt.
So in that, for example, when you begin,
Wenn man also anfängt,
like how to be in touch with ourselves.
wie können wir mit uns selbst in Kontakt
If you
kommen?
begin with a practice, for example,
Wenn man zum Beispiel mit einer Praxis anfängt,
such as meditation.
zum Beispiel der Meditation.
Now in that, you begin with, if you were to say, okay, more formally, how you begin with is what's called shamatha practice,
Also mal formell
Oder
gesehen würde man in der Meditation mit Shamatha oder Shine beginnen.
which is a practice of, what is shamatha or shine?
Was ist Shamatha oder Shine?
Literally, shamatha or shine means calm abiding.
Wörtlich übersetzt würde Shamatha oder Shine bedeuten ruhiges Verweilen.
Which is tranquility,
Das heißt eine Meditation der Ruhe,
which is practice of mindfulness.
die Praxis der Achtsamkeit.
Because at the moment the point is we're lost, we're distracted.
Denn im Moment sind wir sozusagen, haben wir uns verloren, wir sind abgelenkt.
In fact, the reason why we are not in touch with ourselves,
Der Grund, warum wir nicht in Kontakt mit uns selbst
because
sind,
we're out of ourselves.
ist, weil wir quasi außer uns
In
sind.
fact, one great master called Tukugen, I always quote him.
Wie ein großer Meister Tulku sagte, und ich zitiere ihn hier
I
immer,
always quote this because it's a very profound
zitiere immer
saying.
das, weil es so tiefgehend ist.
He often used to say,
Er sagte sehr oft,
the samsara is mind turned outwardly, lost in its projection, is what samsara is.
Samsara ist ein Geist nach außen gewandt, verloren in den eigenen Projektionen.
Whereas nirvana is mind turned inwardly, recognizing its nature.
Während Nirvana ein Geist ist, nach innen gewandt, seine eigene Natur erkennend.
The main point is that we are lost.
Der Hauptpunkt ist, dass wir uns verlieren.
We lost touch with ourselves,
Wir haben den Kontakt zu uns selbst
and
verloren.
mind is lost
Der Geist
in its perception
verirrt sich in seinen Wahrnehmungen
and its projections.
und seinen Projektionen.
And we are all over,
Wir sind überall
and nobody's at home.
und niemand ist daheim.
So it's very important is to begin by bringing the mind home.
Darum ist es so wichtig, damit anzufangen, den Geist heimzubringen.
Bringing the mind home.
Den Geist heimzubringen.
It's like almost you have to bring yourself back to you.
Es ist fast so, als würde man sich selbst wieder zu sich selbst bringen.
A bit like, let's say, it's like, you know, if you use the example like a projector.
Würde man jetzt das Beispiel eines Projektors
Like
benehmen,
a mind is like a projector.
also der Geist ist
And
wie ein
it's
Projektor.
all projected, but you know,
Und es ist alles nach
what we
außen
need to do
projiziert.
is we have to dissolve all the projection
Was wir tun müssen, ist, alle Projektionen wieder
back into the
aufzulösen
projector.
in den Projektor.
We bring ourselves back.
Das heißt, wir bringen uns selbst zu uns selbst zurück.
It's really to bring our mind back.
Wirklich unseren Geist
First
zurückbringen.
step is to bring ourselves back.
Das ist der erste Schritt, uns selbst wieder
This
zurückzuholen.
is where in spiritual practice,
Und hier ist in der spirituellen
when you do
Praxis,
meditation, prayer,
durch Meditation, durch Gebet,
you remain in silence.
durch Schweigen.
I remember one very, very holy Christian priest.
Ich erinnere mich, ein sehr heiliger
He's a
christlicher
very close
Priester,
friend of his own, he used to say.
ein sehr enger Freund seiner Heiligkeit,
He
sagte,
often used to say, it is often in quietness and silence that we find inner strength. He used to say that.
er sagte, dass wir oft in der Stille und im Schweigen finden wir innere Stärke.
Very much, you know. We need to really bring ourselves back.
Wir müssen uns selbst wieder zu uns bringen.
So that is what first thing you do
Das ist also das Erste, was wir
through what is
tun,
called shamatha, bringing the mind home.
durch das, was Shamatha genannt wird, den Geist heimzubringen.
And to develop, therefore, you see, instead of the antidote to distraction
Und als Gegenmittel gegen die Ablenkung
is mindfulness.
gibt es die Achtsamkeit.
And you practice mindfulness,
Man praktiziert, also übt also
such as
Achtsamkeit,
mindfulness of breathing,
zum Beispiel die Achtsamkeit auf den Atem.
to start with, and then slowly through that practice mindfulness.
Und durch diese Achtsamkeitspraxis,
What is extraordinary is all our, you see, the scattered self,
und all diese zerstreute Selbst
like come together.
kommt wieder
That
zusammen.
we are in very many in pieces, you know.
Wir sind in Teilchen
The pieces come together.
und diese Teilchen kommen wieder
It's a
zusammen.
bit like, you know, if you take a film, a video of a plate breaking, you know.
So, als würde man einen Teller, der gerade zerbricht, filmen
Okay? And then you rewind it, plate rewind.
und dann spielt man das rückwärts wieder ab.
And you know, with the pieces coming together.
Und die Einzelteile kommen dann wieder zusammen.
It's like that. It's like really bring all things and becoming whole.
Also alles kommt, fügt sich wieder zusammen und wird
Becoming whole.
ganz.
Becoming whole.
Wird ganz, wird heil.
Is it clear?
Ist das klar?
Becoming whole.
Ganz werden, heil werden.
And then when that happens,
Wenn das geschieht,
also the restlessness,
wird auch die Ruhelosigkeit,
restlessness.
Ruhelosigkeit,
You know, you overcome restlessness.
auch diese innere Unruhe wird überwunden.
And also, it's very amazing is two things you got. I remember Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche always used to
Und
say.
ich erinnere mich, wie Soygal Rinpoche immer sagte,
He always used to say the problem in the West is speed and aggression.
das Problem im Westen sind Geschwindigkeit und Aggression.
Speed and aggression.
Geschwindigkeit
Spindigkeit
und Aggression.
Aggressione. Slowly you slow down.
Man wird langsamer.
Langsamer. So, very much you see, as we bring our mind home,
Wenn wir unseren Geist heimbringen,
there's a really very much a sense of settling.
gibt es ein Gefühl, dass sich etwas setzt.
Like fall into place.
Es fällt auf seinen Platz.
You fall into place.
Man selbst fällt auf seinen
So you
Platz.
see, because you like this, you know, not so well. When you fall into place, then you feel, you are where you should be.
Wenn alles auf seinen Platz fällt,
Really. And then it really also makes sense.
dann ist man da, wo man eigentlich sein sollte. Und das macht dann auch Sinn.
Really. Really come home.
Man kommt heim.
Become whole.
Man wird ganz heil.
And, speed and aggression is kind of cut through.
Geschwindigkeit und Aggression sind durchschnitten.
Something very amazing through this kind of practice.
Es ist wirklich erstaunlich, durch diese
Aggression,
Praxis
frustration,
werden Aggression,
negativity is diffused.
Frustration, Negativität
When we really
entschärft.
sit
Wenn wir wirklich sitzen,
through the mindfulness practice,
durch die Praxis der
And
Achtsamkeit,
very important thing is spaciousness,
dann ist das Wichtigste Weite, Offenheit.
that openness.
Offenheit.
Not only mindfulness, but openness.
Nicht nur Achtsamkeit,
Spacious.
sondern auch Offenheit,
Spacious.
Weite,
That generosity.
Großzügigkeit,
Really. That ease.
diese Gelassenheit,
It's like almost that warmth.
fast auch diese
That
Wärme.
you practice warmly.
Man praktiziert oder übt die Wärme.
And then something really settles.
Und etwas setzt sich.
And, so you find like a rest.
Man findet Ruhe.
Really. Now the subject
Le sujet,
is to bring the mind home.
c'est ramener l'esprit en lui-même.
How do you do that?
Comment faire cela?
Actually, it's quite simple.
En fait, c'est assez simple.
There's this very famous saying
Il y a ce dicton très célèbre
by all the great masters of the past.
de tous les grands maîtres du passé.
In Tibetan, it is Chu Manyuk Natang Semma Chunade. That, when you translate, it means just as water, if you don't stir it, will become clear.
De même que l'eau, si vous ne l'agitez pas, deviendra claire,
That's the nature of the water.
telle est la nature de l'eau.
In the same manner, the nature of mind is also such.
De la même façon, la nature de l'esprit est aussi telle
That if you do not manipulate
que si vous ne la manipulez,
or contrive
si vous ne la
or fabricate
forcez pas
by thinking,
en pensant
too much thinking,
trop,
and leave it in its unaltered natural state,
et que vous la laissez dans son état naturel inaltéré,
it will find its true nature.
il trouvera sa vraie nature.
And so, in many respects, when you begin
Quand vous commencez,
to be spacious,
soyez spacieux.
comprends? Spacieux, 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 spacieux. To your mind,
Envers votre esprit,
to your emotions,
envers vos émotions,
to the circumstance, to the situations.
envers les circonstances et les situations.
That whatever the circumstances, you bow.
Les circonstances, vous vous inclinez.
You bow. You be spacious.
Vous êtes spacieux.
You be spacious to yourself.
Spacieux envers
You be
vous-même.
spacious to thought emotions.
Spacieux envers les
You be
pensées.
spacious to your anger.
Vous êtes spacieux envers votre colère.
You be spacious to your jealousy.
Spacieux envers votre jalousie.
You be spacious to yourself. Very much. Just being spacious to whatever.
Spacieux envers tout.
And it's actually that attitude of being spacious
Cette attitude d'être spacieux
has such a tremendous power
a un tel pouvoir
of transforming,
de transformer,
calming,
de calmer,
easing,
de mettre à l'aise,
freeing
de libérer
the mind.
l'esprit.
Comprends? You have to be strong in the goodness that we are.
Fort dans la bonté.
Let's say if you're a practitioner,
Si vous êtes un pratiquant,
practical. I think first of all, the most important thing,
La chose la plus importante, tout d'abord,
as some of you may know already,
comme certains d'entre vous le savent
in the
déjà,
Buddha Dharma, teaching of the
les
Buddha,
enseignements du Bouddha
the
Dharma,
most important thing is good heart.
la chose la plus importante, c'est le bon cœur.
And in that respect, motivation.
Et de ce point de vue-là, la motivation,
Very much. The goodness.
la bonté.
The whole point of practice
Tout le but de la
is to really bring us back to our fundamental goodness.
ramener à notre bonté fondamentale.
And through the teaching and the practice,
Par l'enseignement,
when we come to discover
quand nous venons à
that fundamental goodness,
bonté fondamentale,
then we should be unshakable.
nous devrions être,
We should remain firm
nous devrions rester fermes,
with that. Whatever the circumstances is,
quelles que soient les circonstances.
like a rock,
Être comme un roc,
whatever the wind and the weather may be,
soit les vents et
you remain firm.
il de reste ferme.
Then what happens? All kinds of weather circumstances
Tous les climats, toutes les
only make the rock into more beautiful.
ne font que modeler le roc en des formes.
Will form your character, will make you even more beautiful.
Donc les circonstances formeront votre caractère.
Do you understand? It's very much to be strong.
C'est vraiment être fort.
The strong in your goodness.
La force dans la bonté.
And that's why sitting.
C'est pourquoi on s'assoit.
Sitting.
On s'assoit.
Sitting is being.
S'asseoir, c'est être.
Being.
Être.
Being.
Être.
Being.
Être.
See? Being.
Être.
Quietly being.
Tranquillement être.
And you breathe
Vous respirez
just quietly,
tranquillement.
natural to the flow of your breath, just quietly. Yes. And in some ways it's very simple. If you just remain spacious,
Demeurez simplement spacieux,
like this,
comme ça,
as I am
comme je suis.
sitting, practicing, just quietly keep your mouth slightly open,
Vous gardez la bouche légère,
as if you're about to say,
comme si vous étiez sur le point de dire
quietly like that, you know,
tranquillement ainsi.
quietly.
Tranquillement.
Like that. And breathe as you find.
Et respirez comme cela vient.
No special breathing,
Pas de respiration.
but just quietly as you remain.
Tranquillement, vous demeurez.
Then what happened?
Et que se passe-t-il?
In that way, slowly your mind
De
settles.
cette façon, lentement, votre esprit se dépose.
Clear. Just quietly. You see, as we breathe in
Alors que nous inspirons
and out,
et nous expirons,
very relaxed,
vraiment détendu,
ease,
à l'aise,
spaciously,
d'une façon spacieuse
quietly.
et tranquillement.
The mind
L'esprit
eases.
est à l'aise,
Quietly.
tranquille.
And settles.
Et il se dépose,
Settles.
se dépose.
Clear. And then what happens?
Et que se passe-t-il?
Really, the amazing thing
La chose étonnante,
is then you are.
c'est que vous êtes.
Vous êtes. Comprends? Vous êtes. Then wherever you are happy.
Vous êtes heureux,
Because you are.
car vous êtes.
You can relate to everything.
Vous pouvez vous relier,
In fact, you can relate to yourself,
vous pouvez vous relier à vous-même,
which is amazing.
ce qui est étonnant.
You feel also comfortable in yourself.
Vous vous sentez à l'aise,
Completely comfortable in yourself.
complètement à l'aise,
At ease. There's confidence, trust. You know the French expression, to be well in your skin.
être bien dans sa peau.
A little bit louder.
Donc l'expression française, être bien dans sa peau.
Very much that. To be really at ease
Être vraiment à l'aise.
with yourself. That means there's something also changes here.
Il y a quelque chose qui change ici.
In your mind and heart kind of come together almost.
Le cœur et le racine.
It's also on a gut level.
Et vraiment au niveau des tripes.
Something eases.
Quelque chose se met à
Something's released,
quelque chose est relâché.
relaxed, freed. And then you just are.
Et vous êtes simplement.
You just are.
Vous êtes simplement.
And you can just be with.
Et vous pouvez être avec.
Comprends? You can just be with.
Vous pouvez être avec.
And it's so extraordinary
Tellement extraordinaire.
because when you're able to be,
Quand vous pouvez être,
you're the purest
vous êtes le plus pur.
of yourself. What it really means that when you just are,
Ce que je veux dire, c'est quand vous êtes,
it just really, you just can relate.
vous pouvez vous relier.
Relate.
Vous relier.
There's no longer barrier.
Il n'y a plus de barrière.
There's no duality.
Il n'y a plus de dualité
In fact, of this and that.
de soucis
Me and you.
de moi et de vous.
And also of activity.
Et aussi dans l'activité.
Everything becomes like one.
Tout devient un.
But also you are clear.
Et également, vous
You don't become just like a soup.
ne devenez pas comme
One.
dans une soupe.
You also are clear.
Vous êtes très
You
clair.
also, you are you.
Vous êtes vous,
But without the ego.
mais sans l'ego,
Without this one.
sans celui-ci-là.
Sans saisi. Saisi?
Sans saisie.
Because this is the cause of
Car ceci est la cause
pain,
de douleur,
suffering,
de souffrance.
free grasping.
Vous êtes libre de saisie.
Now, when we begin, today I'm going to talk about the practice first,
Aujourd'hui, je vais d'abord parler de la
and
pratique.
then the purpose of it I talk a little bit later.
Et le but, j'en parlerai un peu plus tard.
See, the practice.
La pratique,
How do you begin?
comment la commencez-vous?
You begin. It's very much also how your body is.
C'est vraiment comment est votre corps.
Body is. Body. There's a saying
Il y a un dicton,
in Tibetan, "Temdre lula dik na tokpa semlanchar." That means if you create the auspicious condition in your body and in your environment, then meditation and realization will automatically arise.
donc il y a un dicton, si vous créez les circonstances favorables dans votre corps et dans votre environnement, la méditation et la réalisation s'élèveront naturellement.
Very much. That's why you see, for example, when I sit, I just sit like this. Even in my, like when I sit, I bring the view.
Quand je m'assois, moi-même, j'amène la vie,
When I bring my meditation in my body,
j'amène la méditation dans mon corps,
with my mind,
avec mon esprit,
with the view of meditation,
la vue de la méditation,
with the understanding of the nature mind,
compréhension de la nature.
you ease the body.
Vous mettez le corps à l'aise,
Comprends? You ease the body.
vous mettez
Like, for example, a master or practitioner, a good practitioner, would just before even he or she assumes the posture, because normally you create a good posture to tame the mind. Because if you create a good posture, if you sit in an, how would you say, in an inspired way, then also that will inspire the mind. But then sometimes the other way around also. When your mind is inspired, then your body is inspired. And which further inspires the body. Comprends? Which actually affects your body. Especially your emotional body. And your mood. Humeur. Comprends? Comme ça. Especially when you do it in a very spacious way, your mood has no chance. It's very quiet. It's like somebody very charming can disarm anybody. You see, you disarm your mind through the charming spaciousness kind of thing. Just with love, with your goodness, with compassion, radiating that. Almost sometimes you have to actually give out love and compassion, almost to yourself, to the environment, to your body, to your being, in order that you may find ease in yourself. Because I notice something. In the West, really, I find there is so much, sometimes it's quite, even to this day, I've been in the West now over 20 years. Even to this day, it's a surprise that how kind of sometimes fickle the emotions are. And you know, how moody we are. Comprends? And how insecure sometimes we are. And sometimes you see, when something happens, you don't feel so well. You don't quite understand why you're not well, but that in that not knowing, you kind of brood. You brood. You kind of like a sulk. And then you just like déprimé, un peu déprimé, état de déprimé, little bit like that. You see, you just let it, your mind little bit like you cave in, you go through, and then you become very insecure. You become even more insecure. Comment? And then you make yourself weak. Then and you become uncertain about everything. Even things that you trusted before, now you're not sure. Because you're not sure. Comprends? That's why sometimes you see at the beginning, we have to cut that. Change that. And then when you begin, you're softened. And then when you begin, then the posture. Posture. Posture, most important to sit upright. You said that, you know, your back should be like an arrow. Or like a gold coins pile up. Your spine. And you should inspiringly, like a mountain. You understand? And then you see your mouth slightly open, as if you're about to say, and breathe more through the mouth, more easily. Because also, when you breathe through the mouth, it has a way of calming the energies. You understand? Very much nicer. Just quiet, and then eye, traditionally, you should keep the eye at a plow's length. Eyes half open or half shut. You have a choice. But then when your mind is very agitated,
Quand votre esprit est très agité,
you bring the gaze more down.
descendez plutôt le regard.
But when you are more sleepy
Quand vous êtes plutôt
or
endormi,
it's dull,
ou quand c'est mort,
then you open eye a little bit more,
vous ouvrez un peu plus,
bring the gaze more up
vous élevez le regard
to open your mind.
et pour ouvrir l'esprit.
Particularly if it's really, your mind is dull
Si votre esprit est mort,
and sleepy, open the window,
ouvrez les fenêtres.
for example. Or breathe out like,
Respirez comme ça.
like in a, you know. And then just sit more with clarity.
Et asseyez-vous avec plus de clarté.
Is that clear? And then these are the very simple postures.
Ce sont des points très simples.
And as regards the hands,
En ce qui concerne les mains,
you can sit in this way
vous pouvez vous asseoir assis.
also. But in the yoga they do this.
Dans le yoga, ils font ça.
But actually in the meditative tradition
Mais dans les traditions médicales,
of Tibet, particularly in the highest teachings,
dans l'enseignement le plus
like in the Mahamudra or the Dzogchen,
Mudra et du Dzogchen,
these are the highest teachings.
sont les enseignements.
According to that,
Selon cela,
this posture,
cette posture,
this one, covering the knee. This is called mind and ease and comfort posture.
ceci est appelé l'esprit dans la posture
Ah,
de confort et de l'aise.
One great master called Longchen Pa,
Un grand maître appelé Longchen Pa,
but he's really this is his posture,
c'était sa posture.
very much like this ease,
Vraiment cette aise,
There's also a posture of compassion.
qui est aussi la posture de la compassion,
It is known as the posture of natural great peace.
qui est appelée la posture de la grande paix naturelle.
In fact, as one of my masters put it,
Comme l'un des grands maîtres le dit,
rest in natural great peace, this exhausted mind, beaten helplessly by karma and neurotic thoughts, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace.
demeurez dans la grande paix naturelle. Cet esprit épuisé, battu sans répit par le karma et la pensée névrotique, semblable à la fureur implacable des vagues qui déferlent dans l'océan infini du samsara.
Rest in natural great peace.
Demeurez dans la grande paix naturelle.
This exhausted mind,
Cet esprit épuisé,
beaten helplessly
battu sans répit
by karma and neurotic
par
thoughts,
le karma et la pensée névrotique,
like the relentless fury of the pounding waves
semblable à la fureur implacable des vagues
in the infinite ocean of samsara.
qui déferlent dans l'océan infini du samsara.
Rest in natural great peace.
Demeurez dans la grande paix naturelle.
You understand? Natural peace. And also, mind also really much at ease. You see, body still,
Corps tranquille,
speech silent,
la parole silencieuse,
mind at ease.
esprit à l'aise.
In fact, I remember one very Christian priest,
Je me souviens d'un prêtre,
a kind of a holy man.
un homme saint,
He used to say,
un saint homme qui
it is often in quietness
c'est souvent dans la tranquillité
that we find inner
que
strength.
nous trouvons la force intérieure.
That when we remain body still,
Quand on demeure le corps immobile,
speech silent,
la parole
the
silencieuse,
mind at ease,
l'esprit à l'aise,
then really we find, how do you say, we find the inner strength.
nous trouvons cette force
We
intérieure.
come home,
Nous revenons en nous-mêmes,
we become ourselves,
nous devenons nous-mêmes.
and we dissolve all the things.
Relevons toutes les choses
Those are just, you see, confusion,
qui sont seulement des confusions,
a kind of grasping or ego self
une sorte de soi égo
that dissolve.
et celui-ci est dissous.
Something very amazing in meditation.
Vraiment étonnant,
When you really sit,
quand on s'assoit vraiment,
it purifies.
cela purifie.
It's like sometimes you see our aspects, we're very much fragmented.
Parfois, on est vraiment fragmenté.
Fragmented. You know that we're very fragmented, very nervous, very fragmented. Like we are all over.
Nous sommes pas partout.
I often say to people, we are all over
Je dis souvent, nous sommes éparpillés partout.
and nobody's at home.
Personne n'est chez soi.
You're never at home.
Vous n'êtes jamais chez vous.
That's why almost you miss yourself.
Pourquoi en fait vous vous manquez vous-même?
So meditation is to bring the mind home.
Donc la méditation, c'est
Really.
ramener l'esprit en lui-même.
Is to really to come home.
C'est revenir en soi-même.
You understand? But then, of course, not all of us are able to arrive at that, straight away. So we need more kind of methodology. We need a methodology. We need a kind of a method. You understand? And this is because, not that we need a method, but rather because our mind is so used to occupying with all kinds of things. You see, mind is entangled in everything, For example, whenever anything rises, immediately mind, grasps on it. So each thought takes us away. You understand? Very much. So that we are not ourselves. I often say we are scattered all over and nobody is at home. Sometimes we are so split up that we don't know who the hell we are. Really we. And sometimes we have many split personalities because we don't know. Then we find ourselves, wanting or lacking. And in that there is a tremendous suffering. Not knowing. In fact, the greatest suffering is not knowing who we are. And so, on the Buddhist path of meditation, see, the first step, or rather, what I was saying earlier on is the reason why we need a method is because our mind is used to occupying with so many things that we need to actually distract the mind from distraction, you see, and give it something, a little toy to play with, a good toy, something to focus on. Clear? So, in the Buddhist path, the first meditation that you embark upon is called shamatha. Now, the reason why I use the Sanskrit or like this is to more authenticate that. So it's not just recently, how'd you say, conceived in California. So that it's called shamatha, in Sanskrit, Tibetan called shine. What does it mean? Shi meaning peace, also pacifying. Ne is remaining, means peacefully remaining, or you can translate as calm abiding. And this kind of meditation is often known in the West as tranquility meditation. And fundamentally, this practice is a practice of mindfulness, because we realize that our mind is so distracted, and so an antidote to distraction is mindfulness. Understand? So the first step is practice of mindfulness. Now, in this practice of mindfulness, it could be with an object or support, or without object, but generally with an object or support you begin with. And there can be many, many methods also. One that is common to all schools of Buddhism, but not only in Buddhism, but is used now in most of the disciplines, most of the meditative disciplines it's used, is the using the breath as an object of meditation. You understand breath? Now the breath is actually in Sanskrit called prana, in Tibetan called lung. Basically, you see, mind has two qualities. There is a clarity aspect of mind, and also there's a movement aspect of mind. You understand? The movement aspect of mind is quite a lot connected with prana. That's why sometimes watching the breath is also a way to tame the mind, because the breath is like the vehicle of the mind. When the vehicle stops, the driver stops, isn't it? So sometimes when you're nervous, your breathing is also that way. When you're calm, the breathing also becomes very still. So working with the breath is a way to work with the mind. You You understand? So using breath as an object of practice. Also, breath is something very special because breath is really the purest, the simplest. In fact, the breath itself is the life. Like, for example, I often say, when you breathe out, that's dying. When you breathe in, that's life. Life and death is actually in. So now here, you use this. Now, on this occasion, of course, you don't really embellish the breath with all those significant, you don't really, when you practice this, the practice is very simple. You don't really start saying, oh, breath is, life, and breath is this, because then it becomes more, more distraction. Here, simple thing is just very simply, when you breathe out, just know that you're breathing out. When you breathe in, just simply know that you're breathing in. Just knowing. Because collective mind is knowing. Collective mind is knowing. But unfortunately, ego has used this knowing mind to grasp. So what we're trying to do is freeing this mind which has been captured by ego, to release this and just into the state of pure knowing, pure awareness. Is that clear? So very much, therefore, more like is untangling the mind, unknotting the mind. So just simply, you see, so when you watch the breath, first simply, how do you say, when you breathe out, you know you're breathing out. When you breathe in, there's no commentary. No saying, okay, I'm breathing out, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, I'm breathing in. No. Just simply, But then also, as this practice is fundamentally a practice of mindfulness, that means a practice of concentration. Concentration. Because you see, when you get distracted, because you lose your concentration. So it's a fundamental practice of concentration. Mindfulness is a practice of concentration. Sometimes it's known as also concentration meditation. But the danger with, or the downside of that is that you might concentrate it too much. So danger is you may fixate. I always tell my German students that, the danger lies for them is that they should not concentrate too much. You understand? So that's why, what I'm trying to say is that so that's why the masters recommend that you place only 25% of your attention on the breath, on the mindfulness of the breathing. 25%. For my German students, only 18%. Or 15%. But then, you will notice that, you see, when you're practicing that way, after a while, after about 10 minutes or so, you realize you're doing everything but watching the breath. You could be probably kind of, playing football match or just, involved in your own, in your own movie. It's kind of you enter into daydreaming, you see. So, you're doing everything but watching the breath. So therefore, another 25% of your attention is what in Tibetan call hijin, meaning continually knowing. That means continually knowing, continually overseeing, aware that you are actually watching the breath. 25% is mindfulness of breathing. Another 25% is overseeing that you're being mindful. You notice that in your life, when you work also, that sometimes you're supposed to be doing something, but if you're not aware, if you're not overseeing, you might sometimes either you may be fixating on it too much, or else sometimes you've completely forgotten what you're doing. So 25% on the mindfulness of breathing, another 25% is overseeing that you're being mindful. Now, what you're left with is 50%. Now what you do with the 50%? 50% is you relax. spaciously. The state of calm abiding. Of course, the exact percentage is not so important. But the important thing is these three elements: mindfulness, the awareness, and the relaxation. Spacious relaxation. Is that clear? Now, of course, also, it's very, very important also how we sit. When we sit, the posture is very important, because body, and the way our body is, what kind of environment we create can affect very much the mind. There's a very famous saying, Temdra lula digna tokpasemlachar, which means if you create the auspicious condition in your body and in your environment, then meditation and realization will automatically arise. So that you see, like there are many, for example, details about the posture, but to put it more simply, the most important is to sit very much upright. Upright. Sit very inspiringly. Inspiring. You understand? Don't slouch. Is that an English word? Okay. Don't slouch. Don't, sometimes when people meditate, they just sit like that, Then it's like really in the state of depression. What I'm trying to say is if you sit in a depressing way, then also, your mind will become depressed. So therefore, you should sit in a very inspiring way. Even though the posture is connected with the body, but actually it's with mind. The most important is the mind, the attitude. If the mind is inspired, then it will inspire the energy, and thus inspire the body, which will in turn inspire the mind. So you should sit inspiringly. And often in the Tibetan tradition, it's recommended more to sit this way. I mean, of course, this also is meditative posture, but often this is called mind in ease and comfort posture. Many of the great masters, just completely relax in a state of complete ease and poise like this. And then you sit in a, in a very inspiring way. And then also recommended that you don't keep your mouth completely closed. You keep your mouth slightly open as if you're about to say, ah. And you breathe more through your mouth. It is said that when you breathe through the mouth, it actually helps the discursive thoughts to dissolve into the central channel called avabuddhi. So all the discursive, the karmic winds dissolve, giving rise to the wisdom wind, to the nature mind. This is from the ancient teachings of Tibet. But that doesn't mean, of course, if you breathe in the nose, that's also fine. But also sometimes when I tell this to students, they become very aware of this, and and then the mouth becomes cold, it becomes dry, because that means you're fixating on that. You start saying, okay, what's going to happen now when I breathe through the mouth? What's going to happen? You always, one of the worst things you do is to wait. Really. Waiting for meditation. Waiting for something to happen. Then it will not happen. And maybe sometimes all kinds of experiences can come. You can feel if you feel your mouth dried up, then I do like that. It's okay. Simple. You understand? Just keep your mouth slightly open. Quietly. Breathe. But breathe naturally, to the natural flow of your breath, quietly. And then also eyes. This is something that's very important, is that often I find many people, when they meditate with the eyes closed. Well, when you begin, yes, it's fine to practice with your eyes closed. Sometimes when you're very agitated, or when when you sit, close your eyes just quietly, you can go into absorption. But the thing is that, you see, meditation is not just absorption. Absorption is just kind of more entering into you, which could be like just the first step of meditation. You understand? It's not the real meditation. So the beginning, just to relax, particularly if you're stressed or something, you can keep your eyes closed. But then gradually as you become centered or at ease, then you open your eyes. Because as you will find that if you continue to keep your eyes closed in meditation, then, slowly, especially if the room is warm, you gradually fall asleep. It will induce sleep. But also more important, that is that the eyes are directly connected to wisdom channels, to the heart. So that by keeping the eyes closed, it closes the wisdom door, said to be. That's why if you look at some of the great masters in the Tibetan tradition, when they practice, they will practice with the eyes, sometimes gazing into the sky. And also eyes not like this, in the meditation, but they would just, eyes would be fixed, but not again like that, but just really completely at ease, He said eyes, the gaze should be like the ocean, pervasive. And also when you look at, you're not particularly looking at, something. You're not looking at the color, you're not looking at the paintings, you're not looking at the wall, or not looking at the next neighbor's sweater or coat, or, the hairstyle, or, you don't actually focus on anything particular. Just leave your gaze spacious, but without grasping entering into your gaze or into your perception. So it's quietly leaving the gaze open. Because when we begin to practice this way, even though at the beginning we may not be doing like the clear light meditation or the luminosity. For example, those of you who have read the Tibetan Book of Living Dying, it speaks of the fundamental or the luminosity or the clear light at the moment of death. There are higher meditations, trainings to realize the clear light in this life. Even though we are not at the stage of doing that practice, but yet by practicing with the eyes open, it actually helps us gradually, when the meditation is done with a good way, not kind of bad habit, but a good way, then gradually that will awaken the wisdom that is inside you. So, of course, sometimes you keep your eyes a little closed, that's okay. Sometimes also when you chant mantras, that time you can keep your eyes closed. But then when you really sit, keep your eyes open. Because you see, the whole point of meditation is not to run away from the world, not to close the senses, but to be really at peace with everything. I remember my master Dujjal used to say, you leave the seeing in the seeing, you leave the hearing in the hearing, and you leave the thinking in the thinking. Just quietly, you leave everything as they are. That's it. And then actually something incredible also. When we practice that way, there's also, well, this is on a deeper level, that when you practice that way, there's also a tremendous inspiration that comes from also, seeing, hearing, without getting caught up. So when we practice that way gradually, first of course, you'll find that the mind, when you start, when trying to quieten the mind, you find that it becomes even more wild. It's like a baby trying to put them to sleep. They'll just be all crazy. So you just have to just stay with it, and not get caught up or not get worried or not get, agitated by all this agitated. And you keep, that's where the discipline is. That's where you keep, focused. Keep, like for example, whenever you find your mind, going in the easterly direction, you bring it back to the breath. If you go in the west, bring it back to the breath. North, you bring back to the breath. Wherever it goes, you bring back to the breath, bring back to the breath, bring back to the breath. Gradually, slowly, mind will settle in the breath. You understand? And that very simple discipline is even whenever you find yourself distracted, and then you say, oh, how did I ever get distracted? And if you start really looking for how did I get distracted, that's also distracted. That's also distractions. So that instead of saying how did I ever get distracted, you just simply bring back to the breath. And you keep doing that gradually like that. Then slowly at the beginning, you see, at the beginning there is that kind of, you see, all this agitation. You understand? It is said that at the beginning the meditation is like a torrent, like a waterfall. Then it goes down the gorge like a powerful river. Then it becomes a stream that winds way down the plain. Then gradually into the ocean. So in the same manner, you see at the beginning it becomes very wild, but then gradually as you do, then mind will kind of, settle, but then you feel a little bit self-conscious. You feel there's a breather, there's a breathing in the breath. But gradually as you keep practicing, slowly, slowly the breather, breathing and the breath shade into one. After a while, when your mind settles, calm, settles, it's like all the breathing and breath dissolves, you just become the breath. You understand? Then when you go further, there come a time when even the breath as the object of your practice is no longer necessary. And so now you're able to remain in the nowness. So gradually the mind settles in the state of calm abiding. In fact, this kind of practice is called shamatha. That's in the ancient Sanskrit language, which is the ancient language of India. In the Tibetan, it's called shine. I don't know how she's going to translate shine. Which means, shine is actually, if you translate, is calm abiding, or peacefully remaining, or sometimes known as tranquility meditation. And as your mind settles, quietly mind settles, really, I think this practice is very, very good when you have I remember a Tibetan Lama friend of mine, he had a little bit blood pressure problem. And he said that we found this practice is so good. It really helps to bring the blood pressure right down. Not only that, so many other things. That initially that shamatha, then gradually as you progress in that practice, it has incredible benefit in the power of healing. In that very simply the mind settles. Thank God. Mind settles. It sits quietly. It behaves. You understand? In that it settles in you, so you are you. In fact, you can say another way, all the fragmented aspects of ourselves come whole. When you talk about holistic healing, I think this becoming whole is really the fundamental thing to holistic healing. Becoming whole, more complete. And also, the extraordinary thing is also through this kind of practice, it's like a practice of reconciliation. It's also a practice of making friends with oneself. Because a lot of the inner struggle, they kind of just naturally dissolve. And what is also extraordinary is that the negativity, as well as the negativity such as anger, and the frustration often the pain and the suffering also is diffused. Hence, this is the highest form of inner disarmament. The practice of real, profound peace. And it's very amazing. It's like, you see, when we practice this way, it's like suddenly you really become in touch with yourself. In touch with yourself. Because sometimes, you know, the problem with us is that we are our best friend, but we are also our worst enemy. And there's so much inner struggle. Sometimes the biggest problem is not with others, with ourselves. So much problems we have with ourselves. Is that through that kind of, you see, peace, pacifying, gradually there's a kind of really, how do you say, healing, reconciliation, diffusing the negativity. And as you come into touch with yourself, what happens is also all the stories that we have, the stories, you know the stories, the cinema, all the hope, fears, all these things dissolve. Really, particularly in these days, we experience a lot of fear. Fear. The greatest fear is the fear of fear itself, you know. Remember? The conquering. Really. It's actually conquering our own mind, its own perception. Because when we conquer our own mind and our own perception, then we become victorious. We become powerful. In a good way. And also extraordinarily in this, the ego and its grasping tendencies kind of dissolve. One is content to just to be. The grasping tendencies kind of go a little bit out of order for a little while. And as you come into touch with yourself, you also, the barrier between you and others break down. There's no longer barrier. You feel kind of really oneness. Really. As you feel oneness, there's a feeling comes of love, of compassion. And also what is revealed behind all this is one's fundamental goodness, good heart. Quite excellent. So very much, you see, as the mind settles, you see what you discover. Remember earlier I said, you know, not only you kind of your blood pressure and all these things, you know, settle. In fact, interestingly, last November, there was a conference of Tibetan medicine in Washington, D.C. His Honorable Dalai Lama was also presiding in one of the first meetings. I was a participant. And during that time, one of the professors from, I think, the Harvard, one of them, he had done a lot of research with the Tibetan practitioners of yoga, or called Tummo. And they've done a lot of research and found the wavelength, the brains, and all the metabolomes, everything change or remain, you know. You know, we have all machines to check. Actually, you know one thing? You don't really need machines to check. You realize yourself. When you read things, really, there's an incredible transformation. You feel actually your body change, or all your psychophysical, your energetical mind, or the body, actually transform. You feel such an extraordinary wellness. In fact, at that moment, I feel there's a kind of an incredible transformation happening on a molecule, on a cellular, not cellular form, but cellular level. In fact, I think I may have told you this research have shown, the scientific research have shown that when you're in a good frame of mind, in the happy state of mind, even the cells in your body smile. And holding a little glass of champagne saying, chin chin. Whereas when you're in a negative frame of mind, that even your cells become malignant. And in fact also attributed to also perhaps also in a weakening of your antibodies, of your immunity system. The strength is very much the energy of the mind, the inspiration. There is so much power in it. And that is something that we have. The power is in us, very much. And actually, in this day and age, such kind of practices are not just for luxury. It's a necessity to survive, to be healthy, to be sane, and to be happy, and to contribute to the happiness and the peace of others. Is that clear? And also, extraordinarily slowly through this, what is revealed behind it all, your true nature, who we really are, beyond the ego self. Then you find deep down there's such a goodness, such a goodness, such a goodness. It's like forever we've been kind of clouded, you know. We've never been able to see our true nature. In fact, sometimes, often, when we are really clouded, we really feel like when we see the sky is clouded, we really think the sky is clouded. And then we think, you know, but when we take a plane and go beyond the clouds, you feel there's an infinite sky that's never ever touched by the clouds. In fact, through this kind of practice, gradually the cloud-like thoughts and emotions just dissolve, revealing the sky-like nature mind. And out of the sky-like nature mind shines forth one's own nature like the sun. And that with the sun that shines, there's a tremendous warmth and tremendous light, isn't it? The light is the wisdom. The warmth is love and compassion. When that true nature is revealed, there's a tremendous wisdom and compassion. In fact, if you were to ask, what is the mind of enlightenment? What is Buddha's mind? It's wisdom and compassion. And in fact, when we are able to purify our ego, you know, through this kind of practice, what is revealed is our own wisdom and compassion nature, our true nature. In that goodness, we are one with God, one with Buddhas, one with all the masters. Feel the blessing and feel a tremendous also gratitude of devotion, of humility also. Not saying, ooh, I am becoming close to a Buddha or something like that. No, there's a tremendous humility and tremendous gratitude, devotion to the Buddhas, and tremendous compassion for all beings, that what you wish so much that all beings may be free of suffering, and may they have really the ultimate happiness, which is actually enlightenment. Really, what is enlightenment? I mean, people think of enlightenment as some kind of something that is, of course, enlightenment is difficult to attain. But sometimes we think enlightenment is only for holy men and women, not for us. But actually speaking, enlightenment means happiness, true happiness. That we are all seeking. That is to say, when we are really free of suffering, that is to say, when we're free, when we remove the cause of suffering, which is ignorance and the negative emotions. And when we come to discover our own true nature, wisdom and compassion nature, then that is enlightenment. So therefore, when you wish for beings to be free from suffering, that's called compassion. When you wish all beings to have happiness, that's called love. That love and compassion, in a really profound way, bring the real love and compassion is wishing all beings to attain the perfect level of enlightenment, because in that is freedom of suffering, freedom from suffering, and the attainment of perfect and lasting happiness, which is our own. Because until then, whatever happiness we have is only temporary. Those particular cause and conditions go, then we fall back, particularly when we fall back to our habitual patterns, negative emotions, when we result suffering again. So very much, you see, what you discover actually in the midst of that, you discover your true nature, Buddha nature. And you realize also, quite extraordinarily, is that when you discover that your real nature, in fact, you really realize that your true nature is actually unchanging. In fact, it's interesting in the ancient tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, in the Nyingma, in the Dzogchen tradition, the primordial Buddha, that is the nature of all the Buddhas, the primordial, sometimes known as Dharmakaya. That's the Buddhist terminology. It's called Samandabhadra, Kuntusampo. Well, that has many, many meanings, but if you put it very simply, Kuntusampo meaning, Kuntu meaning always. Zambo means good, well. Basically, it's unchanging goodness. Unchanging goodness. You understand? Unchanging goodness. Like, for example, when you go beyond the cloud, you find there's an unchanging, the sky, the unchanging, It's always, you see, you understand? Like that, there is, in the depth of our nature, there is this unchanging goodness, which is our Buddha nature, which has never ever been touched by, even though when we're negative, it's only on the surface. It really doesn't touch our real nature. I give you an example. This example is a very good one. It's an example of a movie projector. When you show when you have a movie projector is a bit like our mind. This analogy of a movie projector. All the different mechanisms in the movie, projector is like our senses, the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, all these things. They work all together. And then the frame is what? The fickleness of the mind. Frames. You understand? The picture frames. And when they move at a particular speed, it gives the illusion of reality. And it's projected onto the screen of phenomena. Now, if you go back into the projector, and if you look, there's a little bulb. Light. Without this light, there's no cinema. You understand? But the light is not at all involved in the cinema. It's got nothing to do with it. So in the same manner, what has happened is our own wisdom and our true nature is misused by ego. Misused, but it itself is never stained. Never ever stained. Another example it is used in the teachings is the example that our nature of mind is like a mirror. Now, mirror reflects all kinds of things. Reflection like all kinds of thoughts. But the wonderful thing about the mirror is even though there may be all kinds of reflections, but reflections never ever dirty the mirror. So therefore, when you realize that, it's an incredible discovery of this incredible goodness that is in us. This is what in Christianity, when you speak of that we are all children of God. We are all made in the image of God. That godliness, goodness in us. In the Buddhist teachings, we call it Buddha nature. That is unchanging. In fact, the teachings, it said that this Buddha nature is so good, so pure, so perfect that Buddhas cannot make it better. We sentient beings, we cannot spoil it because nobody can touch it. It's pure, unstainable. So when you realize that, when you really discover your fundamental goodness and that nature, in fact, something incredible, when you experience that, you feel so good. You feel so well, so happy. You understand? Really, on the gut level. So good you feel so well, incredible, so real. And you didn't know that that is actually you, real you. Everything else is peanuts. Everything else is illusory. Gradually, then what happens? This incredible thing is that the mind settles in the mind. And then gradually, all the fragmented aspect of ourselves, you know? You remember I said we were exploded all over, that they come back, you become whole. It's a bit like, you know, an explosion, if you filmed it, and then you had it on the video, and you rewind it, replay in how the explosion comes back, and becoming whole, like that, you know, you become whole. Slowly, all the fragmented aspects of ourselves come home, and we become whole, and that really, then all the inner struggle, the conflicts that we have with ourselves, resolve. We become friends with ourselves. You know, sometimes even the inner, you know, the hatred, all these things dissolve. In fact, the negativity is diffused. That's why this is really the highest form of inner disarmament. Disarming removing the harm from us. You understand? Removing the harm from us. Removing the anger, removing the harm, removing the destructiveness from ourselves. So it's really, indeed, is a practice of peace. That's why it's known as shine, calm abiding, or peace. It's practice of pacifying. Then you see also incredible thing is that you know you become in touch with yourself. Barriers between you and you dissolve. Not only that, barriers between you and others dissolve. As you come into touch with yourself, and as gradually also ego and its grasping tendencies dissolve. Not only the negativity and the pain and suffering is diffused, but the ego and the grasping tendencies gradually dissolve. You suddenly become released from the prison of ignorance. From the clutch of ego. And as you experience that, you experience the freedom and of this joy of being in touch with yourself, of truly coming home. And when you do that, you not only you feel at home, but you also feel or in touch with yourself, but also you're in touch with others. You understand? Really in touch with others. Or that means another way of saying you're in touch with your feelings, you're in touch with your heart, with your mind. You understand? Same thing. In a fundamental sense. And then really you begin to also understand others, because you are understanding yourself. You begin to, another eye opens up, you begin to understand others as same as you. As others are same as you, others are all like you, then just as you care for yourself, you start caring for the others. Others become as important as you. You understand? Slowly. This is the beginning of the practice of compassion. Gradually then what is awakened, or what is awakened, is love and compassion. Or that is to say, you come in touch with your fundamental goodness, your good heart of kindness and compassion. And your heart is filled with love. The genuine love. The compassionate love. Is that clear? Really, it's incredible. And in this also, the fundamental forgiveness happens. Forgiveness. You forgive yourself. One that profound really peace that certainly has happened. Then out of that comes, then you see a very clear thing. Suddenly, you know, like almost a cataract is removed. You know, cataract is removed. And suddenly, you know, begin to see things become clear. You have a panoramic or a really clear insight. You begin to see. You have really the bigger picture, begin to see things, understand things. It's like almost you enter into the heart of things. You begin to have a profound insight into the nature of reality. into you. And this is what awakening of the wisdom, what is known as wisdom that realizes the egolessness. This is the level of the clear insight. And then gradually, in a sense that our ordinary mind has kind of temporarily died, and your wisdom mind is dawning. As it happens, from this comes the profound insight. And then, it begins to radiate compassion. Because you see, just like the sun, often I compare that, you see, when the cloud-like thoughts and emotions dissolve, sky-like nature of mind is revealed. And out of that sky-like nature of mind shines forth our own Buddha nature, our own bodhicitta, like the sun, S-U-N. And the sun has two wonderful qualities of tremendous warmth and tremendous light. That warmth is like the love and compassion. That the light is wisdom. Wisdom and compassion. You understand? I always feel thoughts purified is wisdom. Emotions purified is compassion. Or in the same manner, mind purified is wisdom, heart purified is compassion. In fact, if you were to ask, what is the mind of the Buddha? Is wisdom and compassion. When your ordinary mind has been purified, when you awaken into the state of enlightenment, what is the state of the mind of the Buddha is wisdom and compassion. So the wisdom, compassion begin to emanate from your being. And then you have a tremendous compassion, like the sun that shines without any bias. You understand? So, but then now, that's just the beginning. Then you should live that. Try to live it. Try to live that. You understand? When you practice that, it brings you in touch with your true nature, your Buddha nature. But then you should try to live that. Live that every day. As you live that every day, and you create a kind of a culture around you. Really, you create an environment. You embody that in you. And then you create that. And you practice it. Then, you really, the whole world, it changes. It changes also. Because as your mind has changed, your perception, your phenomena changes. The circumstance begins. First change is insight. And then once the change inside has steadily affected, then even the external circumstances begin to change. You understand? You must live that, because it's not enough to have this experience once in your practice. Because we lose it again. We fall back into again. So we have to continually practice in order to get back to the space, and then to live it, try to abide by that in whatever we do. That's why often we practice in the morning. So that morning is the beginning of the day. It's like it's good morning. Because since you are in the state of goodness, everything that you see is goodness, you touch is goodness, everything becomes goodness. Because goodness is what you are. That's why I receive some of the great masters. Sometimes I wonder, how are they? Why are they so in that incredible state of perfection? Why is that they always benefit beings? Why are they so incredible? It's because they're always in touch with their goodness. This they accomplish through practice, through discipline, through training the mind. And so we can do too, through training, gradually. But it takes time. It really takes time. It's not just, I think sometimes the West people think it's just, you want just a quick enlightenment, instant enlightenment, like an instant soup. I like instant soup. But instant enlightenment is something else. It's actually not really possible. It's only a, understand? It's not possible in the instant. It really sometimes takes lifetimes. But then he said, if it's lifetimes, even if it takes lifetimes, when you begin, your life changes. And you move on to enlightenment, to more and more awakening. Because there are many levels of awakening. So that when we really live gradually, then our life will change. We become better. We become happier. Filled with, and then we also bring happiness to others. And we can change not only our home life, we can also change the workplace. Meaning, that life has meaning, there's value. Then there's value. Then there's meaning, there's purpose. Then it's fulfilling. And it's satisfying. And sometimes when you really practice this way, when you practice little bit, and then you live that, you feel such a satisfaction. You feel really accomplishment. You really feel that you've lived. You realize this is the purpose of life. How can we be a Buddhist and live in the world? But just by being yourself. You understand? Just by being yourself. I don't think, it's really, I think it's very much that all the masters always really emphasize on being just normal. That is to say, you don't have to be special when you're Buddhist in a sense, or abnormal for that matter. Just go along with everything, whatever you do. Outwardly you may appear the same, but inwardly, the way you deal with situations, how you view them will be different. And this is, again, according to the level of your practice. For example, if you're dealing with meditation. One thing, it's been really very important that Soygal Rinpoche Rinpoche, who I knew very closely, I could say we were good friends. And he always used to say, he used to make his students just sit and sit and sit. Because if you sit, something happens. Sitting is very good. In fact, the reason why I think he had an impact is because he made people sit. Sitting is very important, really sitting. Not just sitting on your, but really on your cushion, just really practicing. Just allowing your just mind quietly settle. When your mind settles, things become a little bit clearer. And the things that obscure your mind, or you become a little bit more spacious, or you have a little bit of objectivity to things. So I think it's very important, really sitting, just practicing, and then you see being mindful. I think it's sometimes when you practice, I think what would be very good is that if you practice every morning, sit. And to create a good environment. I think also it's important is that you have to get into a habit of practicing, because otherwise, you see, it could be that, you always, like sometimes, it could be like a pigeon, Tibetan saying, pigeon makes the bed whole night, and, and the dawn comes, there's no time to sleep. So sometimes we could just spend the whole period, trying to sit, trying to find different, maybe the cushion is not comfortable, maybe the incense is not correct, for example, maybe the picture is not right, so you could like find an excuse of while you're not able to, because just your mind begins to kind of, how do you say, it begins to roam, and it begins to kind of, what is it called, fluctuate, or what's the word, mind begin to wander or go from one thing to the other, and it's also in a sense of an inability to sit. Or doesn't mean that you have not the ability to sit. You are not capable of sitting. It doesn't mean that, but that your mind is a little bit wild. So I think when that happens, you just keep sitting. And I think first you work out what kind of things works for you. You set the environment really. First, you create a really inspiring environment. Create an inspiring shrine. And then you just sit. You set it that once, when you set it up, then that's already there. And you understand? In the same manner with the instructions also, you really go through the instructions, you become familiar with them. Once that's all there, and come to know your practice also, once you come to know the practice, then you just simply decide on that and just practice, rather than fluctuating from one to the other. And just begin to just sit, just to, quietly. And first, just sometimes just by being spacious on itself can be a kind of, can make a difference. There are so many different ways, of practicing. But whatever way helps your mind to settle. I think in your case, perhaps watching the breath, focusing on the out breath, isn't it? Very much just quietly. As then gradually the mind settles. As the mind settles, in the mind, is in the mind, or rather afterwards breathing the breath becomes one, and you're able to remain in the nownness. When you remain in the nownness, it's important not just again, it's also important that after practicing a while, when your practice is accomplished, then not to get stuck in your practice. When you take a lift, when it arrives, you have to come out of the lift. You understand? Otherwise it doesn't work. You understand? I remember, I will tell you a little bit of story. During my student days in England, I used to take these buses. And normally sometimes the English bus conductors are quite rude also. And they can be quite rude. And I remember, one particular time that I was, I'd done practice in the morning. And I was kind of catching this, and the bus conductor was very rude. But then what was amazing, I saw this, is that instead of getting angry and provoked by him, and acting very emotionally, thinking of just me, you understand? You understand, and reacting, because we were very protective, very defensive, Instead, what happens is this, that something else, you see something else. You begin to see the other person. You begin to see suffering, his pain. And I remember just accepting his anger or his rebuke and just sitting quietly, and then I struck a conversation with him. Then realized that he himself was very unhappy in his life. So I don't know, sometimes you see when we're in this way, that even when others anger, and this thing, you begin to see them as like suffering. And so through compassion, what you want to do is you want to embrace their anger. Take that in through compassion and give them love. And something amazing is that as we practice this, we have the enough strength to do that. Because as our mind is transformed and has become a little bit touched with our fundamental goodness, there is that love and compassion, and source of that. You understand? And you begin to really feel, and actually when you begin to integrate that, then it's amazing also. Not only you benefit others, also you tremendously benefit yourself too. And instead of anger, you begin to have compassion for them. And it's sometimes amazing when you have that attitude and you don't take their anger in a kind of an angry way, but you just actually accept their, understand their frustration, and when you really are spacious with them, or even kind of compassionate in your way, and then talk and be with them. I sometimes had quite incredible conversation with them, bus drivers. They tell you their whole life story. Just like that, so it's very much when you integrate it like that to practice in yourself, and then, then every situation is an opportunity to practice of purification. Then what you do is, like in every day, you practice mindfulness, awareness, and of kindness, of compassion. Is that clear? And when you do that, when you really try to do that, and the important thing is really, you have to kind of, make a decision in yourself, saying, sometimes it's helpful to say, okay, I'm going to practice today. And of course, ideally speaking, of course, we're supposed from the moment we enter the Dharma, you should be on, never off. You understand? Always like on. Never a part-time practitioner, but in a full-time. Really on, always mindful, aware, But that's sometimes difficult. But that's why sometimes we need to renew our pledge, saying from today I'm going to really practice from this morning onwards. I shall be mindful. I shall be, kind. I shall be, particularly if you're not so patient, I shall be patient, and try to really remember that and trying to really integrate that. And then, every situation is incredible, and particularly if you practice in the morning. But in that, of course, it's very important that you should have a practice. To practice that helps you to, how do you say? And when you do that way, then what happens is this, that then in every situation is an opportunity, and not only that, Then there are times when you lose a little bit, Then you come back to the practice again. Like in the meditation, when you lose it, then you come back to the breath again. When your mind is scattered, or to bring mind home. But when you're present, then it's not necessarily for watching the breath, but whatever situation is to attending to that mindfully with awareness. Because that means everything is breath, becomes breath. I think we have become where we are because of how we been, In fact, Buddha said, if you want to know your past, look into your present condition. If you want to know your future, look into your present action. As we become where we are, if you look into your mind, how you are, it's because where we've been. You understand? So realizing that what teachings gives you a way out of this, in a sense, a solution, a method, gives you tools. And so when you do that, then you make a pledge. Because sometimes you see when you listen to the teachings, it's incredible. The teachings suddenly give you such a profound understanding of how you've been yourself. Like how we take so seriously our thoughts and emotions. How we can get entangled. I will give an example. Let's say you've been kind of, going through a very deep emotional kind of crisis. You understand? And you've been in a kind of like a loop. You go around and, when you really get stuck and really, and I think it's kind of a perpetuation that you've been kind of, enhancing it. When you're in a kind of that kind of